one you watched over and over when you were a boy. You used to tell me about it all the time.
Trust in the law.
Trust in law. That's the one. Tell me how it ends.
There's a sheriff on a horse. He's shooting at somebody riding after him. It's a man all in black. A man in the hood. And he's got a lasso, and he throws it at the sheriff. Pulls the sheriff right off his horse. And they're in front of the church now. And the door was burst open, and all the townsfolk come running out to see what's what. The man in black tells him the sheriff's no good. Cattle thief. He's stealing from the town. And now they ask the man who he is. He throws his hood back, and it's Bass Reeves, the black marshal of Oklahoma. He shows his badge. Townsfolk cheer.
They cheer for him, huh?
Yeah. And they start shouting for him to string up the sheriff. But Bass Reeves won't have it. There will be no mob justice today. Trust in the law.
What color are those townsfolk?
White.
Tell me, what happened to the Dreamland Theater, where you watched that picture over and over while your mama played the piano? What the Klan and the fine white citizens of Tulsa do?
They burned it down.
You ain't gonna get justice with a badge, Will Reeves. You're gonna get it with that hood. And if you want to stay a hero, townsfolk gonna need to think one of their own's under it. You sure you want to do this?
I'm sure.
I don't want to set the world on fire.
Welcome to Superhero Cinephiles. I'm Perry Constantine. Looks like this week we had another little mistake with the feed. There was the first version of this episode that went out had some audio overlap, and that was because of a mistake I made during editing. So I've gone ahead and fixed that now. So if you did listen to that first one and you heard something garbled, then I apologize, and hopefully this one works out a lot better. Thanks so much. Welcome to Superhero Cinephiles. I am half of your co-host, Perry Constantine.
And I am the other half, Derek Ferguson, coming at you from beautiful downtown Brooklyn, New York. Excuse me. How you doing, Perry?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm coming to you from Kagoshima, where we are not quite quarantined. University classes got delayed by 2 weeks, but my other school, where we just had a meeting yesterday, and we're still planning to move ahead starting our classes. And in fact, I ended up getting discovering what classes I'm going to teach this year. So I'm pretty excited about this semester because they gave me one of my classes. They gave it to me twice a week instead of only once a week. And so I'll be teaching a total of 3 classes. And in the past, I've taught like a Japanese literature and film class, but this year they decided, you know what, let's split them into 2 classes. So I'll be teaching only a Japanese film class and then only a Japanese literature class, as well as viewpoints in world issues is the other class I'm going to be teaching. So I'm really excited about what I'm going to get to do this semester.
Oh, cool. Very cool. I hope it worked, hope everything, works out for you.
Yeah, so it's going to be a lot of fun to do that. How about you, Derek? How are you doing in quarantine?
Well, listen, like I said, me and my wife we are, we hibernate anyway. Although I must say that spring has come early this year because in the last couple of weeks, we've had like a run of weather, like it's been like springtime. We've had I think today it's like 65 degrees.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's kind of okay. The thing is that we're lucky in that we have a car, so that if we want to get out, we don't have to interact with other people. We can just get in the car and just, take a ride.
Right.
And, just drive around for a while. If we start to get the cabin fever, unlike, like other people who don't have a vehicle, if they want to get out, they actually have to get out and walk around. But I mean, it's no real hardship as yet.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, as far as we're concerned, yes, you have people that are worried how they're going to pay their rent, how they're going to take care of other things that they got going on, how they're going to pay other bills, everything like that. Thank God we don't have to worry about that. But so far so good. I mean, we're doing all right. Patricia's fine. I'm fine. Health wise, we're staying away from people, and we're just like everybody else. We're waiting to see how this thing eventually plays out.
Well, I found out something interesting because, as you guys know, I'm an American citizen, but I live in Japan, and so they're talking about these $1,200 a month payments they're going to be given out to everybody, right?
Yeah.
And so I figured I'm not going to be getting any of that because of even though I file tax returns every year, I live abroad, but it looks like that because some of my income is from U.S. sources, like from the book sales and stuff like that on Amazon. It looks, because I file a tax return every year, it looks like I might actually get some of that stimulus payment too.
Really? No fooling. Cool.
So that's good, and we might also. We're talking about that in Japan, too, where they're going to be... In fact, it was funny. Yesterday, they made a big deal about the prime minister making an announcement about some measures the government's going to take. So everybody's thinking, he's going to announce stimulus payments, which is something they've been talking about for, the past few weeks. So he goes on TV, and he says, what we are going to do to help households in Japan is we are going to issue 2 cloth masks to every house.
Say what now?
Exactly.
Say what now?
He said and he goes on TV, he's wearing his cloth mask. He says, we're giving out 2 cloth masks to every home, which, some homes have more than 2 people in them, so...
Yeah, they're saying here now, I was just watching a little while ago, I was upstairs when I was getting the mail, that they're saying now that the CDC is going to start telling American citizens that it's going to be mandatory to start wearing masks, when you go out.
Yeah. So what I decided to do was I went online and I got this kind of, it's a reusable type mask. It's got a filter in it, and you can remove the inserts out of it. So I bought one of those because first off, it's more comfortable than those disposable masks, and second, those disposable masks, I want to leave those for the medical workers and the people who really need them.
Yeah. I've got one of those type of mask myself for when I do work around the house.
Right.
So I don't breathe in because I've got problems with my lungs and stuff like that. So I don't breathe in fumes and stuff like that. I've got one of those type of masks that, what's the guys I'm thinking of? What's the guys that work with wood? Carpenter. Yeah, carpenter. Yeah, you ever see they have a mask so that they don't breathe in the wood dust?
Right.
Yeah, I've got one of those types of masks. So I'm going to, and it's reusable. You don't just wear it one time and throw it away because it's meant to be used over and over and over again.
Right.
So I bought that a couple of years ago. So I guess I'm going to have to start getting used to wearing that when I go out.
Yeah. And I think that kind of thing is better, save those other masks for the people who really need them.
Right. Yeah. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people have thought of, going to hardware stores or stuff like that. If you need a mask and getting one of those masks.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing me that nobody's really thought of that because the experts, they've been saying you don't need those N95 masks. You only really need something because the main concern is not preventing you from getting it from other people. It's preventing you from possibly transmitting it through the moisture in your mouth.
Right, exactly. It's so that you won't give it to somebody. You're keeping it in, Yeah, exactly. That's the whole thing. A lot of people think that, oh, well, I wear it, for the wrong reasons. They're wearing it so they won't breathe it in. No, that's not it. So that the people who have it, it'll stay with them.
Right. And one of the reasons why they didn't want people wearing masks in the first place is because, those masks, they have to be worn a certain way. And most people don't really know how to do it. So they're constantly like fidgeting with it and touching their face even more, which is increasing the risk. So that's why they're now telling people, like, look, you don't have to wear that particular kind of mask. Like, you can, even just a bandana is better than nothing.
Yeah. All right. Because what I was doing, like when I was getting out of the car, when I was going shopping, I had like a scarf, and I would just wrap the scarf around the bottom half of my face.
Yeah. And that's all you really need to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I was doing,
All right,
pretending like I was the shadow,
So speaking of covering up the lower half of your face, we got the perfect TV show for that, because we're doing episodes 4 to 6 of the Watchmen miniseries.
Yep.
Beginning with, so I made a mistake last one, because I said in the last episode that episode 4 is the Looking Glass episode, but I was wrong. I realized that when I went to watch them, is the 4th episode is titled "If You Don't Like My Story, Write Your Own," which is a line from the novel Things Fall Apart, which is about European colonization in Nigeria.
As a matter of fact, there's a scene in this episode where Cal, Angela's husband, he's reading the book.
Yeah.
He's reading that book, and she spoils it for him. And he just says very calmly, as a matter of fact, this was the episode where in rewatching it now that I know what's coming later on, this was kind of like a hint that he's Dr. Manhattan, when he has to explain when his children are speculating on where the Don Johnson character went after he died.
Right, yeah.
And they're speculating, did he go to heaven? And he comes over to the table and he gives them this very clinical explanation that there is no heaven, and, he didn't belong anywhere before. He was nothing before he was here. Then he was born, he lived, he died, and he went back to nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And then Angela even kind of like talks, says she's like, she kind of gets upset with him when he says that, and she gives him this kind of, not really upset, but she's just kind of like, really, that's what you're going to tell a little kid who's just learning about death for the first time?
Right, yeah, because it's a very cold and clinical, and it was weird to me because most black people, at least black people that I know personally, most black people are spiritual.
Right.
So even if they're not Christian, they believe in something else. They believe whatever. But generally, on the whole, most of the black people, I mean, I'm sure there are some black atheists. I don't know any personally, but I'm sure there are. But the point I'm trying to make is that most black people that I know of have some sort of spiritual belief. So for Cal to have been so cold and clinical about the notion of heaven, because he just says flat out, oh, well, that's made up. That's a myth. That's very cold and clinical. But of course, now looking in hindsight, and while I'm rewatching these episodes, now I'm picking up on all the clues I missed the first time around. This cat was Dr. Manhattan. Okay. And there was clues along the way to tell us, and I do believe that was one of them.
And also when Angela tells him, she's like, so when were you going to tell me that you spoke to Lori? Which was another hint. Like, the first time I watched it, I was wondering, like, why is she so upset about the fact that, he spoke to Lori? And then you realize now, because, in the past, Lori was, Dr. Manhattan's girlfriend.
Right. Yeah.
And so that...
That kind of came off to me like it was a little bit more than professional, like she was, she was kind of like upset that. But then again, when they're in the car talking, okay, because remember they're going to see Madame Trieu.
Yeah.
And they're in the car talking, and Lori tells what's his name in the back, says,
Petey.
okay, well, tell her who, because they're having the whole discussion about, wearing masks and being superheroes. And Lori says, okay, well, I used to wear a costume too. Mm-hmm. And it's like that Angela wasn't aware that she was Silk Spectre, which I pretty much thought was public knowledge.
I think it was, but what also jumped out to me is when when Petey tells the story of the Minutemen, right? And Angela's first reaction is, you mean like the TV show? So that kind of jumped out to me because it's this, she's aware of like Dr. Manhattan because he was, such a public figure. But a lot of the other stuff, it's kind of been almost lost to history a little bit, it seems.
Well, it's, it's kind of like, okay, when they started making all of those fictional TV shows about guys like Wyatt Earp and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So there was like the TV version that was different from the Wyatt Earp as it actually was. So I guess they make these TV shows and they kind of like, sweeten up the image of how, Night Owl and all the rest of these guys was. So maybe that's what Angela was going on, what she knew from TV.
Right. Yeah.
And she wasn't aware of the real history because well, of course, I mean, that wasn't public knowledge that the comedian tried to rape Silk Spectre, but I was always under
it was public knowledge because it was in Hollis Mason's book, but it wasn't something
that's right, yeah.
But it wasn't but I think, that's kind of what I'm getting at is that it's become so much time has passed since the 1940s when the Minutemen broke up that a lot of that stuff has been, like, it's probably more remembered if you're in a place like New York where the Minutemen operated. But outside of New York, people probably don't really think too much about it anymore. And it's probably only with shows like the American Hero story that it's starting to come back into the public consciousness.
Right. And who's to say that Angela, maybe she didn't read the book.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, she didn't know because, Lori says very casually, okay, well, go ahead and, tell her everything like that. And, Angela's like kind of surprised when she hears about the stuff going on. Some say, well, I thought it was public knowledge that she was, Silk Spectre and everything like that. So, yeah, okay, but okay, I'll go with your explanation. That makes sense. Thank you. That makes sense. I'm going to go with your interpretation.
Okay. And so this episode introduced a character who's been hinted at for a while, and that's Lady Trieu, who's played by Hong Chow. And the way they introduce her, it's another callback to Superman, right? Because, and another thing that really jumped out to me is the eggs in this episode. Because the eggs are a recurring motif, and we find out in the last episode why.
Yeah. So because the first shot is of a woman selling eggs by the side of the road.
Right. Yeah. And the eggs are such a focus in that opening montage of scenes going through her relationship with this guy and how they meet, they fall in love, they get married, and the eggs are like present in like every single scene. And also you've got when Cal is explaining about death, Angela's making waffles using eggs.
Yeah.
And so all these things just keep coming back and forth. And also, when we first got introduced to Angela in the first episode, we also see her cracking open eggs and making the Watchmen smiley face with them.
Right, exactly.
So
it seems like we can't get away from eggs in this thing. And when Lady Trieu is talking to the couple that we meet, and they're talking about she made a child for them. Well, of course, how did she make the child? Because she had one of the woman's eggs.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. From when they went to the fertility clinic, she had an egg, and that's how she was able to make the child. So yeah, there's another, we go back to eggs again.
Mm-hmm. And did you catch the name of the couple?
No.
The Clarks.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so they're this couple, this kindly couple. They live on a farm, and they want a child more than anything, but they can't have one. They can't. They're for whatever reason they can't have kids. So then comes this mysterious visitor, this scientist, who gives them a child. Right? It's straight up Superman narrative, but it's twisted a little bit because in this case, Lady Trieu wants something in return. Right? She wants all their land.
And know something? Yeah, you're right. Because know something? At the end of the scene, after they made their deal, a rocket from space crashes on their farm.
Right, and then first thing she says when she sees that is, "That's mine."
My God. It just hit me. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
It just hit me.
No, yeah, no problem. And so the interesting thing is what we find out that thing is later on, right? Which we find out that, because we don't learn in these episodes, but in the next ones we're eventually gonna find out that all the scenes with Adrian Veidt have been in the past.
Yeah.
And they're all and that crash, I believe that crash is when he crashes down to Earth.
Because then that's when we start seeing the statue in her, and then we find out later on what the statue actually is.
Right, because in this episode, I think, it's in this episode where they find out that the Lady Trieu has these like flying crafts which can pick things up. They've got like magnetic, I don't know, grips or claws or whatever, kind of like those claw machine things. So they can pick things up, and it's used primarily for construction of this Millennium Clock Tower. But what Laurie suspects is that one of them could have been used to pick up Angela's car, which still had Will in it from episode 2, I believe it was.
Right.
And then dropped it back without Will inside anymore. So, so they go into the facility and they talk to Lady Trieu, and Laurie points out the fact, she's like, holy shit, that's a statue of Adrian Veidt. And she notices, because he's in his costume, but he's old.
But he's old, right? Yeah. And she said, well, why did you make him so old? And she gives him some oh, well, we revere our elders. And then, of course, later on, we find out why he looks old.
Right, because he's actually frozen inside. Like, they Han Solo'd him in that thing.
Yeah, right. Bingo. That's the perfect phrase. Matter of fact, you stole it. I was going to use it. I said they Han Solo'd his ass, basically.
Great minds.
She froze him in carbon. Yeah, really, that's what she did. She Han Solo'd his ass.
Mm-hmm. And, that jumped out to me the first time. Even the first time I watched it, I'm like, yeah, it's a good point. He does look old because he's been missing for a few years, and then he was declared legally dead. So how would they even know how he looked as an old man then?
Exactly. But, and again, I was watching that scene where she's talking to the Clarks. And again, there was another clue that was planted there that I didn't catch the first time around when she brings in the baby and she's talking to them and she's saying, okay, well, if you sell me your farm, sign over your farm to me and I'll give you a child. Mm-hmm. And Mrs. Clark, she starts ranting and raving and screaming and jumping up and saying, oh, you think you're going to come here? How you think you're just going to give me a baby and you're making these promises you can't keep? And she said, wait a minute, you don't understand. I've already done it. Yeah. Which is a clue as to her heritage.
Oh, yeah.
Because remember, in the original Watchmen, when Ozymandias, when he's confronted by Night Owl and Rorschach, and he's explaining his master plan, and they said, oh, well, we're going to stop you. And he said, what do you think? I'm some kind of comic book villain that... He said, there's no reason why I would tell you my plan if there was any chance of you stopping me. I did it 30 minutes ago.
Yeah.
It's the...
Probably the best line in the comic.
Yeah, when I watched it the second time, when Lady Trieu was making, I said, "Oh, okay, bingo, clue."
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Now, if you look because there was speculation, and the Peteypedia files, they kind of added some speculation as to what Lady Trieu's connection was, and it's really clever of them because they put a little misdirection, right? Because in the Peteypedia files, there's a newspaper article from like this Tulsa like gossip magazine, and it's all about like fact and fiction involving Lady Trieu, who's just moved to Tulsa, and she's this big mystery, this eccentric woman. So, and they asked the question: is her father the comedian? Tying back to the fact that when Edward Blake was in Vietnam, he was sleeping with the locals. We saw that in that one scene where the pregnant woman comes after him. And he shoots her. and there's a. And Dr. Manhattan just stands there and watches it happen. So there was speculation online that maybe Dr. Manhattan felt guilty because, Blake calls him out and he says, you could have done anything, but you just stood there and watched it happen. You don't care about us. So there's some speculation that maybe he brought her back to life, or maybe he brought her baby back to life or something, and that
he
baby
saved
was
the child.
Right.
Yeah,
that was the speculation. Another thing they mentioned in the article is that, Blake has several illegitimate children from his globetrotting escapades, including several in Vietnam. So there was a lot of speculation that her father was the comedian.
You know what? That never occurred to me, because that wouldn't explain why she was so smart.
Right. Yeah.
Because Blake wasn't exactly the brightest bulb in the chandelier.
Well, he was smart, just not in the same way. Like, he was crafty.
Yeah. I mean, he wasn't a stupid guy, don't get me wrong, but what I'm saying is that compared to some of the other characters in the thing, he wasn't, like as smart as they were. Let's face it. He was a thug. Yeah. Basically. The guy was a thug. But he did have the interesting thing that I liked about the comedian was that, we can digress just for a minute here, was that he did have a very deep inner pain. I think that was born out of his being in a world where he saw things that he shouldn't have seen.
Yeah. And
because we see that he was the guy that did the Kennedy, the assassination.
Right, and he killed Woodward and Bernstein and a bunch of other stuff too. So
right, yeah. So he was a guy that had, like a really deep spiritual pain, inside of him.
Well, the thing about the comedian is because like you've mentioned before, he's not funny, right? But the point of him being the comedian isn't that he's someone who makes jokes. The fact is, he's the comedian because he views life itself as a joke. He's got this very nihilistic view of humanity. And we see in the comic book that that's taken its toll on him, that worldview, because that's how having that outlook for so long has allowed him to do all these terrible things, and it has affected him on a deep emotional and spiritual level, like you said.
Yeah, because you know what? Matter of fact, he even says when the guy breaks in and they have the fight scene and everything like that, he says just before the guy busts in, he said, "Well, I knew it had to happen sooner or later." Like he knew that this is how he was going to go out sooner or later. He was not going to die in bed. He knew that for a fact.
Right. Right.
Sad guy.
And so in this episode, what do you think of Lady Trieu?
You know what? I liked her. First of all, I like smart characters. I like the way that she came in with such confidence, and she came in and she already had the plan mapped out as to what she's going to do. And for a while there, watching this episode, and again, like you said, it's another piece of misdirection, because I was getting the feeling that, first of all, it was never in my mind whose daughter she was. I knew from this is who she's got to be related to somehow. I don't know how yet, but that's how but she's related to Ozymandias some kind of way. But they kind of misdirected, and they lead you to think that, that she's been manipulating all of the events that's been going on. She's been manipulating some of them.
Yeah.
But she's not behind everything, which, again, we find out later on.
Yeah, yeah. And, the way that Hong Chow plays the character, like, she does a really great job of acting, the performance. You really believe that she is the smartest person in whatever room she's in. And she does a really good job of selling that. Something else that I noticed is when they go to the... Sorry, go ahead.
She has a sort of, how can I put it? She has a sort of casual arrogance.
Right. Yeah, that's a perfect way to say it. Put it.
Yeah, that's the best way I can put it. It's a casual, like you see some people who are arrogant and they're very aggressive in their arrogance. Mm-hmm. But no, she's almost like passive aggressive in her arrogance.
Right.
that I don't know. I found quite appealing as a character. I did. I enjoyed it because it was like, the scene where she's speaking to Angela in Vietnamese and she's communicating a secret message.
Yeah.
And Angela tells her, well, you fuck off and tell my grandfather to fuck off. And they go fuck off some more. And Lady Trieu never blinks an eye. She says, oh, that's so very sweet. I've never heard that before. And I just fell on the floor laughing. I said, I love it.
And so another thing they do here is, I noticed this the second time around, is when they go, because it's Angela, Laurie, and Petey, and they all go to the Millennium Clock Tower together to talk to Lady Trieu. And Beyond, her daughter, comes out and she says, "Yes, my mother's wants to meet you," but then she tells Petey, "Sorry, women only."
Yeah, right? Yeah.
So it's kind of like a little signal that the last Watchmen was all led by men, right? Mm-hmm. And the only real women characters in it were the two Silk Spectres, and they were both very minor roles compared to the others. Like, Laurie does pretty much nothing in the grand scheme of things in that story. But in this, they take the lead, and then it's
Well, this is this is driven by the women. This one, I mean, most definitely, this version of Watchmen, definitely.
So I did like that little signal that they said that Beyond gave there, saying like, women only in this one, like only this kind of conversation. This is only for the women. They're the players in this. You're not the player. You're a bit player.
Right. Exactly. Even though we do get characters, like in the next episode, we get the origin of Looking Glass, and the episode is all about him. And then the episode after that is that utterly magnificent episode is about Will Reeves, but that's like the exception. Like the majority of these episodes, the plot is propelled by the women.
Right.
That's it. Yeah. They're the ones that are moving. They're the engine that moves this plot. Basically.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you also get a hint about what Beyond's origins are, because she wakes up having a nightmare, and she says that she goes to her mom and she tells her that I had dreams of being attacked in a village, and that was another kind of hint that maybe that Lady Trieu has some connection to stuff that happened during the Vietnam War. So that was also kind of like a bit of misdirection, which I thought was a really interesting way they did that. And when she goes and tells her the nightmare, Lady Trieu is happy about it, right? And we find out, and you wonder, like, well, why would she be happy that her daughter is hearing about that? And then we find out later it's because she's actually a clone of her daughter, of her mother.
Yeah, and something. Now that we're recapping this, I realize something. There's a lot of setup in this episode for stuff that pays off later on.
Right. Yeah. Like the first time I watched this, I felt this episode was a little bit slow, but watching it again, I can see why, because this is like the prologue to a lot of stuff that comes.
I felt the exact same way. The first time I saw it, I liked it, but I said, yeah, this is kind of compared to what we've seen before. This is paced a lot slow. But upon watching it again yesterday when I watched it, I said, okay, I understand why it's this way, because there's a lot of stuff in here that is set up that pays off later on in later episodes. Yeah. That's why it's paced that way. And that's why it's so slow, because they got to drop all of these little seeds in there that's going to grow later on. And then we're going to say, oh, okay, I got it now. Okay, I got that now. Okay, now, oh, shit, I got that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, we also find out that she's working with Will, because Will appears at the end here. And in fact, was it just me, or does he look healthier? Not only can he walk, right, before he was in a wheelchair, but even his overall appearance, he looks more physically fit than he did when he was talking to Angela.
Yeah. I mean, he really was playing the part of an infirm old man when he was talking to her. But like you said, he looks more lively. He's more energetic. And like you said, we find out that he didn't need the wheelchair at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because standing up and He's standing up and walking.
And I love the conversation that
sneaky old bastard.
But I love the conversation that Laurie has with Angela in the car, and they're talking about masks, right? And she says, like, you know, and she has this really good observation that, you know, heroes, mass vigilantes, they often have some sort of trauma in their life, so that's why they wear masks to hide their trauma, and that's why they're obsessed with a sense of justice.
Well, yeah, because even you know, you look back at all of the great pulp heroes, or the great comic book heroes. Everybody, Spider-Man, he had one bad day. His uncle got killed when he could have stopped the guy that had did it. And that was his trauma. You know, Batman, his parents got killed. Bruce Wayne, his parents got killed in front of him. That was his trauma.
Oh, Batman's parents were killed in front of him? You know, I wouldn't know that because it's not like they've ever shown that in every fucking movie ever made.
Oh, please, thank you. You know, just once I am so hoping that this Batman movie that they're doing now with Matt Reeves, whenever they get back into production, just give us a Batman adventure.
If you know what, if I see one more scene of pearls falling in slow motion, I'm going to put my fist through a wall.
Matter of fact, to all the filmmakers, if there's any filmmakers that are listening to this, you know, whether you be independent or, you know, you're working for one of the big studios, or you're going to make, do not give us any origin stories. We don't need origin stories. Thank you very much. We don't.
You know, this is a digression, but you know what movie I thought handled the origin story aspect the best?
What?
The Incredible Hulk. Because the whole origin story is done just in visuals over the opening credits. And that's it. Boom,
bingo.
We're all set and we're ready to go.
That's all you need to. And let's face it, in this, okay, just as a perfect example, my wife has no use for superheroes. She doesn't care about superheroes. She doesn't like superheroes. Matter of fact, the only comic book she ever read in her life was Archie comic books. Everything she knows about superheroes comes from her association with me. Okay? Still, even given that, she knows the fucking origin of Spider-Man, Superman, Batman, the Hulk, Wonder Woman. She knows it because these characters are so well known.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, we don't need their origin.
Absolutely.
You know,
okay.
Aquaman, yes, I can see why we need an origin story for Aquaman. Because, seriously.
But most of those big characters, you don't need to do it. And I think Marvel's gotten very smart about it because they've kind of done away with the origin story now. So like they do it sometimes. They did it with Doctor Strange. It was done a bit in Captain Marvel, but it wasn't the focus of that movie.
It was more integrated into the story.
Right.
Than just setting up the origin all by itself.
Right.
Because we learn about her actually being a human later on. We just assume that she's a Kree for most of the movie. Mm-hmm. And it isn't until later on that, you know, we find out. So her origin is like integrated into the larger story, which is okay. But yeah, okay. But with a character like Captain Marvel that a lot of people don't know, yeah, I can see why you need origin. But when we're talking about major characters like Superman and Batman and Spider-Man and the Hulk and Wonder Woman, and you know, most of these characters, you don't need, or even the most casual person with a passing knowledge of comic books knows the origin of Spider-Man. Okay, right. We do not need another origin movie for Spider. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, to me, it's very lazy because a filmmaker, okay, half the work is done for you. Mm-hmm. You don't really have to come up with a story because, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, you know, to me, it's very lazy. You know?
It is. And because we talked before that, It's relied on so often because the origin story is something that Hollywood easily understands because it perfectly fits the 3-act structure.
Right. And in this day and age, I mean, come on, who hasn't seen, you know, the Tim Burton Batman? Or if you haven't seen the Tim Burton Batman, then you probably see the Christopher Nolan Batman.
Well, even the Tim Burton Batman, like they didn't spend a lot of time in the origin. That was something that I don't think we really talked about when we discussed Batman in our second episode. But the origin is very brief. Like you don't even find out that his parents died until like right before the 3rd act.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, he goes to the alley, and he's got the roses, and he's being followed by Kim Basinger.
Right.
Yeah, and he puts it down, and then she finds out when Alexander Knox, gives her like the file.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and that's how she finds out that they didn't spend any time on the origin, because who doesn't know Batman's origin? I mean, come on, give me a break.
Now, two other things I wanted to talk about with this episode before we move on to the Looking Glass one is, we find out this is the very first. This is really the biggest clue we get at this point that Veidt is not on Earth, right? And because he's out on the lake and he's looking for these human fetuses that are being grown in the lake.
Yeah,
and it's such a bizarre scene because he's looking at it, he's like, no, that one's not good. He throws it away. And then he finds these two. He takes them back and he uses this machine to accelerate them. We find out they're Phillips and Crookshanks.
Yeah.
And, he basically grows them, essentially. And then he takes them into the manor. And we find out he's massacred a room full of Phillips and Crookshanks. And then he has them gather the corpses up, and they go out and he's shooting them with a catapult out into the air. So it's just it's because we don't find out what he's planning to do until later, but it's just all this lead up to it. It's so wonderfully bizarre.
And let me say, perfect. So that's the perfect phrase, because we've been following this guy now. We don't know what the deal with him is or what he's doing, but because it's Jeremy Irons and he's so entertaining, we're willing to watch it, knowing that, okay, you know what? I got to see how this pays off. Yeah. Because this guy is so delightfully eccentric. I mean, he's a guy, again, just like I was saying that Madame Trieu was casual in her arrogance, he's casual in his insanity. Yeah. He's taking these little fetuses out of the lake and he's picking them up, and we can see they're alive because, they're making noises and they're moving. And he said, no, not that one. He throws it over his shoulder into the lake. I said, wait a minute, dude, it was alive, No, not that one. And he throws it back, and oh my God.
Something else we didn't mention in the last episode is the very first time we see Veidt and he's riding across towards the manor is there's a pirate flag.
Yeah. And
that's a hint that this is kind of like the Black Freighter segment of this TV series.
Oh, something? I did not even pick up on that.
Yeah, it's something that I heard people talk about. I didn't pick up on it the first time, and then I remember people mentioning it online. So when I went back and rewatched this episode, then it jumped out at me when I saw that pirate flag.
Oh, okay, because you know what? Yeah, I remember the flag, but it didn't even pick up on me that was a reference to the black. Oh, okay, cool. That is massively cool.
I mean, they put so much stuff in this. We could probably come back to this series every year and reevaluate it, and we would still find new stuff in it. I'm sure that if I watch this in about another year, which I probably will, I will again see new stuff in there I didn't see before. Yeah. One thing I'd like to mention before we move on to the next episode, probably the most in a series full of bizarre incidents and moments, this one has one that I think is in the top 3, and that is the appearance of Lube Guy. Lube Man, yes. I was going to mention that was the other thing I want to talk about, because the greatest character in the series.
Oh my God. We see this guy just once. We never see him again. And all the time, and see me, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm waiting. I said, well, listen, I want to see Lube Guy again. Where's Lube Man? Where's he at? Where'd he go?
They're talking about what are they going to do for a second season if they did a second season? I'm like, you know what they're going to do? They're going to do the Rise of Lube Man.
Lube Man rises. Lube Man begins.
There you go.
Oh this guy was, he's a guy, for those of you who hadn't seen it, Angela has gotten rid of the wheelchair that her grandfather because of course he's walking now.
Mm-hmm.
So she's got to get rid of the evidence that he was there because she's covering up the fact that he claims to have killed, what she did. He killed, her boss, Don Johnson. So she gets rid of the wheelchair and she's in costume as Sister Night. She throws it over this bridge. She's on this bridge and there's a train that's going by, like a garbage train.
Yeah.
So she throws a bag with the pieces of the wheelchair because she's cut it up. She throws it in there and she turns around and she just sees this guy dressed in a silver suit just looking at her. Now, of course, he's not a cop. So she says, "Halt, you're under arrest." And the guy turns and starts hauling ass. So, of course, she's chasing after. And they're running, and he's fast as a motherfucker. He's hard. So then he turns the corner, and there's nowhere else for him to go. And she's saying, "Stop, stop, stop." He reaches to his belt where he's got tubes of lube, and he sprays it all over himself. He then throws himself on the ground. He slides into a drain on the sidewalk. And Angela stops and she looks at all. She can say, "What the fuck? What was this?" Oh.
And then we never hear about him again.
We see her go to the police station with his belt because he takes off the belt in order that he can fit. And it's an impossibly small, drain. It's like, it reminded me of the thing from the movie It, where, the clown is at.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those type of dealios. But it's impossibly small. And he just slides into that thing with no problem at all. And he just disappears, and we never see him for the rest of the series. We get no explanation for, hey, you know what? I absolutely love it. That we never found out to deal with this guy.
Well, actually, in the PDpedia files, they do give a pretty strong hint, because what happens is, at the end of the PDpedia files, the very last one in there is a memo from a deputy director or something like that, who says that Petey was relieved of his duties and that his memos were garbage. Because all his memos, he was writing reviews of American Hero Story and shit like that. And talking about superheroes and all that. And he said, and the deputy director, he's like, these memos are garbage. What the hell is all this crap? And then he says he's been relieved of his duties, and then he's gone missing. And all we found among his effects was an empty bottle of lube.
Oh.
So yeah, so it's pretty obvious that he became Lube Man. He became a vigilante himself, and now that he's been relieved of duty at the FBI, he's gone full-on mass vigilante route.
Lube Man. Oh my God, that is hilarious, and and I just sat there and I just watched it, and I just said, I can't believe what I just saw. Why did they do that? What was this? And you just sit there and you're waiting for this guy to pop up again, and he never does. He never shows up again. Hilarious.
So that brings us to the next episode, which is episode 5, Little Fear of Lightning, and this is the Looking Glass episode.
This is the origin of Looking Glass.
Which I wasn't expecting to like this as much as I did. When I saw the preview for it, I'm like, it looks all right. But this show does a really good job of taking things that taking things in a direction you didn't really expect it to happen. Because Looking Glass has been kind of hinted at as being almost the Rorschach figure of this piece.
Right.
And we see that right in the beginning, because he is, in 1985 on 11/2, which I love that they did that. They call it 11/2, just like we refer to 9/11. Wade was in, he was part of some, religious group that was preaching about the end of the world. And they're going to Hoboken, and they go to try and convince people to repent. And he goes over to this group of like punky looking kids and he tries to talk to them and they start giving him shit. And then one of the girls there, you know, she's really nice to him and she's like, no, come on, come with me. And she takes him into this funhouse this mirror funhouse, and there, you know, she's getting into him. She makes him think that he likes her, that she likes him. And she says, "Well, if we're all going to die soon, you don't want to die a virgin, do you?" And then she starts taking his clothes off, and like he's getting excited, right? And then she takes all his clothes and she runs out. And she's like, "Fuck you, Bible boy," and leaves him inside there.
Yeah. Now you know. Listen, that was some really foul shit. That was yeah. I mean, that was cold. I mean, she stripped. I mean, he's entirely naked.
Yeah, nothing but his socks on.
Yeah, not even underwear. You know, I mean, you know, leave the guy with some underwear.
Yeah.
You know, like at least. So yeah, he goes out, people laugh and ha, you know, but damn.
Well, before he even gets to go out there, like and he goes back into the house, and you know he's looking at himself.
It's a moot point. Yeah, it's a moot point.
And he's looking at himself in the mirror, and he's like screaming at himself. You know, he's talking down to himself. He's like, "You're a sinner. You're an idiot." And then the psychic backlash from the squid landing in New York hits. Mm-hmm. And you know, he's in the mirror. He's in that funhouse looking at all these mirrors when it hits him. And he survives, but then he goes out and he sees like all these people are dead on the ground from the psychic wave.
Yeah, most of the people that have been attending the carnival, we see like one or two other survivors stumbling around, but it's like they're out of it. But it's like, yeah, he came out of it, which is what leads me to believe that, and we talked about this in the last episode, which leads me to believe that he does have some sort of superpower as a result of having survived. He does have some sort of psychic ability as a result of having survived, you know, that horrendous event.
Now, before we get into that, like one of the things I loved about this episode is that opening scene of destruction of New York, right? And with the squid tentacles entangled in the buildings, and they show the giant squid on the building there, and my God, it's amazing how they did that.
That's like virtually the panel from the original Watchmen comic.
Yeah.
That, you know, that's it, basically. That's what we're seeing. And yeah, that's like the first time we've ever seen the squid. Mm-hmm. The actual squid. And it is appropriately horrific, you know, to see this thing. You know, you say, oh, my God. Yeah, okay. Well, you know what? Maybe they didn't have special effects to do it back then, but they had special effects to do it now. And yeah, it got the appropriate reaction from me. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, same here.
I said, holy shit.
I was not, because we had the hints. We knew about the squid. This takes place in the comic book universe because we had the squid rain in the first episode. I never thought they'd go full out and show the whole squid.
Yeah, I thought they were just going to leave it at that and just have, you know, but they are like putting it like front and center. Okay, if you didn't believe before that this takes place in the universe of the comic book and it's a sequel to the comic book, well, here it is. You know, this is it. This is the comic book, folks. I said, oh, okay, cool.
It's more than the comic book because the squid is barely visible in only a few panels. Like you only see parts of it in the comic book. And Lindelof showed the entire thing. Like, he showed more than we even saw in the comic book. He took it a step further than even that.
Yeah, I mean, because it's like, I don't know. It's like it's hanging over. I don't know how many buildings. And like you said, the tentacles are inside the buildings and everything like that. Oh, my God. Yeah, I mean, you get a real sense of, okay, you say to yourself, okay, it's no wonder people freaked out.
Yeah.
After this thing landed, I'm freaking out. I'm sitting in my, you know, basement at home watching this, and I'm freaking out. Imagine if, you know, no wonder the poor guy, you know, went. Yeah, it was a horrific event. Let me put it that way. And this series gets across the point that, this truly did change the world.
Right.
You know, between this and Dr. Manhattan, these were events that truly did change the culture of the entire planet.
Right.
Forever.
So you've got people like the 7th Cavalry who are devotees of Rorschach, and they believe the journal of his that was published saying that Veidt is behind everything, and so they don't believe that the squid is from another dimension. But you know, they also show that there are people who, they do believe it, and Wade is one of them because he has this extra-dimensional security system, which is supposed to warn him about any sort of incursions coming from another dimension. He has, and you see, like, there's this whole cottage industry that's been built up around, you know, the extra-dimensional invasion.
Yeah, because the mask he wears is like of some kind of metallic fiber that's supposed to prevent you from further psychic attacks. Right. You know, like another giant squid.
Yeah, and we see like he sleeps with the mask on.
Yeah.
And we also get a call back to Rorschach because he comes home and he's wearing the mask and he lifts it up just to his nose and he's eating from the can of beans just like Rorschach did in the comic.
As a matter of fact, we see that he's got more than one mask. He like keeps them stashed all around so that like he's never without a mask.
And even when he is without a mask, he always wears a baseball cap, and the cap has the same foil lined around the inside.
Right, yeah. That's why he did that. But you know something? It's interesting in that we see that Wade has a pretty diverse life away from being a cop.
Well, because all the cops are masked, right? So they have to have some sort of cover to cover up for the fact that they're secretly police officers. So Angela's cover is that she runs a bakery that, you know, is never really open.
Yeah.
Wade's cover is he helps with market research. And This is where we get the hints, the very strong hints that he is psychic, because he's watching these people go through their Q&As during the market research, and then he talks to the people afterwards. And they're saying, oh, look, we loved it. He's like, no, they hated it.
Yeah, they hated it.
And one of the really cool things here is the first panel he's on is for an advertising program, a marketing program to get people to come back to New York.
Oh, yeah.
So that was something that never even occurred to me, but that, you know, New York is probably not the center of everything in America now because of what happened in the squid attack.
Oh, yeah, well, you know, that's one thing that always bothered me about, say, like, the Marvel Universe. Because I said to myself, why does anybody still live in New York? Mm-hmm. Because, first of all, the first time Galactus had came, everybody would have got the fuck out. That's it. We're leaving. We're not coming back. No more. We are not coming back. Which is, I never understood why people still stayed in Manhattan. To me, there should be nobody left in Manhattan except the Fantastic Four and the Avengers.
Well, especially when you've got, you know, Reed Richards, you know, Mr. Mad Scientist himself, opening up portals and shit to hostile dimensions right in the center of Midtown.
I have always said this when I get into arguments with people about the X-Men, when they talk about, the X-Men, and I said, no, the X-Men are no threat. Mm-hmm. I said, the X-Men have their mansion out in Westchester, a remote part of Westchester, where if they're attacked by Magneto or the Sentinels, nobody's going to get hurt except for them.
Yeah.
No, the Avengers put their headquarters right on Fifth Avenue. Right in the heart of Midtown Manhattan. So when they get attacked by the Masters of Evil, you cannot help but have massive property damage and loss of life and injury. Reed Richards has his own private portal to a hostile universe, and you mean I'm supposed to take his word for it? Listen, this is a guy calling himself Mr. Fantastic now.
Yeah.
Which shows you the size of his ego. And I keep reminding people of this all the time. Remember, he gave himself that name, folks. His wife didn't say, Reed, you should be Mr. Fantastic. Then we could say, okay, well, she every wife thinks her husband is fantastic. No, that's what he called himself. So he's got his own private portal to a hostile universe, and I'm just supposed to take his word for it. He's got it under control. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. See, Reed Richards is a menace. He's the real man, not the X-Men. That's men are minding their business.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
No, Reed Richards and also he's firing off rocket. He's got his own rocket in the middle. Who thinks this is a reasonable human being?
Now this explains why there's been so much. Like you look at the Tulsa in this series, right? It's a very vibrant community. It's very modernized. It's got a lot of diversity in it too, which you wouldn't expect for Tulsa. And so they mentioned that Redfordations, they allowed people for the people who are descendants of the Tulsa race riots, they had a campaign to try and bring people back to Tulsa after Redfordations. And then they had and now you combine that with the 11-2, and it makes sense why there's so much diversity, because people are leaving New York and they're moving to the middle of the country.
Yeah, well, Tulsa, Oklahoma, it's the new New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's why it's so diverse. Because, like you said, everybody's moving out of New York, and they went, and like you said, they got this program that they're trying to get people to go back to New York. And Wade is telling them, listen, ain't nobody moving. I don't care what you do. Nobody's moving back to New York.
Well, one of the things that jumped out to me in that video is the couple who said, we went to Central Park and it was so quiet and so peaceful and there was nobody else around. You're like, holy shit, they're talking about Central Park being empty.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's weird that they're trying to build New York as this like vacation destination, right? This place that you go to get away from it all. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really interesting. And then they got the guy who's eating the Italian food, and he's eating calamari.
Yeah, which Wade points out to them. He said, you know what, you might want to lose the calamari.
Yeah, because you're just reminding people of what happened there.
Yeah, if you want what he should have been eating was like, I don't know, pizza. Anything would have been better than calamari.
Yeah.
The calamari is not a food that you associate with New York anyway. Hot dogs, pizza, something like that. No, not calamari. He said, you might want to lose the calamari.
Yeah. So then, especially because they say, I came back for the Italian food. So just show them eating the pizza then.
Yeah, and also we see that Wade runs like a PDSD group.
Right. I was going to mention that next. Yeah.
Oh well. Go ahead.
Okay.
Take it away.
Something that jumped out to me in this scene is the young black guy who talks about how he wasn't alive in 11-2. But his mom was, and his mom experienced it, and now he feels like he's experienced it too. So there's this. This is like the first time that this idea is really verbally stated, but one of the themes that runs throughout this whole series is this idea of inherited trauma. So you've got the Tulsa race riots, and then reparations trying to make good on that, and the treatment of black people in America, and this. And then also it comes really much into the forefront of the next episode when Angela experiences Will's memories. But this whole idea of inherited trauma, it's an idea that keeps running in the background throughout every episode.
And how you have parents infecting their children, if you will, with their trauma.
Right.
Something that their kids had nothing to do with, but the parents are inflicting their trauma on their children, and their children in turn have to carry that a burden that they don't need to carry, but it's a burden that they have. I use word infected because that's what that's what I see it as. I see it as an infection. You're infecting, the next generation. You know what? There's an old saying that I like that they used, that the old timers when I was growing up that they used to say. You say, carry your own water. Mm-hmm. That means, you carry your own burden. Don't pass it on to anybody else. But you hit the nail on the head that's one of the major themes of this series is that, it's all of these traumas that are being passed on to the next generation. Right. For no reason, that they're burdening, this next generation. That's got nothing to do with what happened.
It's also
they've got to deal with it.
It's also kind of a subtle commentary on the fans of Watchmen itself, right? Because whenever Alan Moore is asked about Watchmen, he says that his biggest disappointment is that nobody has done anything better than Watchmen, and that his whole thing about doing Watchmen was, I didn't expect that to be the be all end all. I expected people to look at what I had done and to do something better. And this also ties into the thing when we get to the next episode with the nostalgia pills, is people constantly stuck in the past. Right? People constantly going back to revisit the past. And that idea, I think that idea of inherited trauma kind of ties into that too, because you have people now who, they weren't even alive when Watchmen came out. And yet they're still holding it in as like the be all end all of comic books.
Yeah. What does that say for the comic book genre as a whole, that we are still looking at Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns as, okay, well, that was it. You know, that was it. That was Citizen Kane, and nothing else that came after that was worth anything. Mm-hmm. Which is basically what fans will tell you. They will say, oh, no, well, Watchmen was it. That was it. No, everything after Watchmen was crap, or everything after Dark Knight. And Dark Knight has that's been the standard by everybody has measured Batman by since then. Dark Knight was when Batman stopped being a detective and started being a guy that simply beat the piss out of his opponents.
Right.
Which I kind of, I don't know. I miss the Detective Batman because that's the one I grew up with. The guy that actually solved crimes, that just didn't get in a Batmobile that had, big honking Gatling guns and, blew shit up.
You remember when Frank Miller and Jim Lee did the All-Star Batman and Robin book a few years back?
Oh, yeah.
And it was... I was thinking about it recently because it was on sale on Comixology, and I missed the sale. I didn't buy it then, but I was thinking about it. I'm like... Because some people were saying that it was Frank Miller being satirical of his own Batman, which, now that I'm thinking back on it, because Frank Miller has kind of lost his mind in the past 10 years. So part of me wants to think that it's satirical, but part of me is not sure if he's actually being satirical or if he's actually being serious with it. If it's satire, it's brilliant. But if it's not satire, it's just more proof of how nuts he's gone.
Well, Frank Miller has said, I read interviews where he said that he really didn't want to do it. He said, but they offered him so much money that it would have been crazy for him not to do it. So he said that he claims he deliberately wrote a comic that was going to be so batshit insane that DC wouldn't want to publish it. Mm-hmm. That's what he says. Okay. Now, whether it's true or not, I cannot count to the veracity. All I know is that, you know what? I'm going to go with him on this one. I think that, he deliberately said, something, I'm just going to write some crazy ass shit, a bunch of whole crazy ass shit. And as far as I know, they never did finish the series, did they?
I think it stopped at issue 9. And I think Jim Lee has said that, he does want to get back to it eventually, but now he's running DC Comics. So who knows?
Yeah. But but that's what, and he said, they just kept offering me so much money that after a while, it gets to the point where you would be crazy to turn down the money. So he said, okay, I'll.
The goddamn Batman.
I think I read the first 3 or 4 issues, and I said, I don't know what kind of shit he's on, but I want some. I don't care. I want some.
Now, one of the people in the meeting here is this woman that he meets and he starts talking to, whose name escapes me at the moment. But they go to this bar afterwards and they're talking. And this is one of the cool things about this episode and how it shows you how the world has changed. Because she's talking about this movie called Pale Horse that Steven Spielberg directed. And it's all about 11/2. And she talks about, and she says, it's all in black and white, and there's this little girl walking through the destruction of New York looking for her mother, and she's wearing this red jacket. And because it's all in black and white, the red really pops.
That was so cool.
And I'm just like, oh my God. You know what? Instead of making Schindler's List, Spielberg made a movie about 11/2.
Yeah.
And if you look in the Peteypedia files, they mention all these other movies. And we could talk about this a little bit more when we get to the Angela episode and her background and everything. But she gets her name from this blaxploitation movie called Sister Night. And the Pedopedia Files, they talk about how a lot of black people, after Vietnam became a state, they left America and they moved to They left mainland America, continental U.S., and moved to Vietnam for work because they were trying to get as far away from the racism of the Nixon administration as possible. And then in Vietnam, you had a lot of these, to cater to all these new residents, there were a lot of films coming out in Vietnam that were like these, instead of the blaxploitation movement that we had in America, you had this kind of like black hero movement in Vietnam, where all these blaxploitation movies came out with black characters wearing masks. And it's just a brilliant revision of history and how it, and a brilliant alternate take on history. And they talk about one of the movies they mention as being part of this, wave of black hero cinema is Batman. So, we talked about how before Bruce Wayne can't be black, but you could have so we got a black Batman in this universe apparently somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah, there's a black Batman. He just isn't Bruce Wayne, but we got a Batman,
which I thought was really cool. And just like, if you guys seriously go to the Pedopedia Files, like some of the early ones are a little bit slow, but some of the later ones, they've got some really interesting stuff in there.
Well, going back to the original movie for a minute, if you remember during the opening credits, where we have Bob Dylan singing the times they are changing, we do see briefly the original Night Owl apparently is rescuing Bruce Wayne's parents.
Yeah.
So there's a Bruce Wayne in the Watchmen universe. He just never became Batman. He just never grew up to become Batman because, of course, his parents weren't killed.
Right.
Yeah. One thing I'd just like to point out before we move on. Tim Blake Nelson. You know why I love Tim Blake Nelson? Because he is supremely expert at playing these, like, redneck crackers that, because of the way they dress and the way they talk, you tend to underestimate them. But there is a very sharp intelligence at work in these characters. He just uses the way he talks and the way he dresses as like a mask in itself, to hide how smart he actually is. Because we see a lot of times in this series that he's probably the smart. To me, I would go so far as to say he's probably the smartest character in this show besides Madame Trieu.
Yeah,
because he's very, very sharp. Even besides the psychic powers that he has, he picks up on a lot of shit that people don't, and he makes connections very quickly.
Yeah, and also there's one more thing I want to mention about this is when he goes to the 7th Cavalry, and this is when we start. This is why I said that these 9 episodes split perfectly into a trilogy, right? Like this whole thing is the second act of this long 9-hour movie.
Yeah,
and we really get to see how. Because the first 3 episodes we're introduced to the characters, we get to know all the players. These 3 episodes, we start advancing the plot forward. And we see they're experimenting with a teleportation device. And Senator Keene shows up. And he tells him, look, I want to show you something. And he shows him this video.
Oh, yeah, the video. Oh, Lord.
It's Adrian Veidt leaving a message to future President Ronald Reagan. From 1985, he's leaving a message for Reagan's inauguration in 1993. Or whatever it was. Because he purposely plays events so that Reagan will eventually become president.
Again, pointing out again,
we go back to the thing, right?
Reminding us that
has been working in hand
at one
in
time
glove with the
this guy was the smartest man in the world,
to try and
that wasn't
maintain
just,
the peace that
him blowing his own horn.
About.
He actually was the smartest man in the world. He could accurately predict who would be president and leave a film for him, explaining, okay, this is how shit's gonna go.
Yeah,
and this is what's gonna happen, and he does it, and of course for Wade. He's sitting there, and this poor guy's world is completely turned upside down. I mean, literally everything that he knew just got drop kicked out the window.
Yeah. And And then he goes home. And first, Keen shows him this because he says, I want you to help us.
Yeah, I want you to help us. You're right. He wants to recruit him, basically.
And then he leaves and he goes back home and he's gotten the new arrival of the new system, the new security system. He takes it out to the dumpster and he throws it out. But then he goes back and he gets it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because listen, some of us cannot let go of beliefs that we've had for so long. And he's lived with this notion, for so long in a way that other people haven't because he was there.
Yeah.
And on some level, he still wants to believe, no, that this is, maybe it was a cell. That's how I interpreted it, that, he went back and got it because he thought about it. And he said, well, how do I know that tape was actually real? How do I know that they didn't make it up? Which is, because we can always rationalize to ourselves and justify our own actions to ourselves in some kind of way. And that's why I think he went back and he got the package, because maybe he was having second thoughts about, the Second Cavalry, which, as we see at the end of the episode, he was justified in having those second thoughts about the Seventh Cavalry.
Something you mentioned also just jumped out at me, because remember we talked about in the last episode how the mask reflects yourself, right? Whereas Rorschach, right, it tells you what it reflects your beliefs, whereas the mask reflects who you are. And when you said that Tim Blake Nelson plays these kind of characters who you underestimate, the mask kind of is a metaphor for that, I think, in a way, because he's hiding his true self, and people are only seeing what they think he looks like, and they're basing their whole impression of him based on that.
Good point. Yeah. Because see, again, in rewatching this, that stood out to me that, and the relationship between him and Angela, it's not antagonistic,
Right.
They're not exactly friends, but they're not exactly enemies either.
Right. Well, he says that, I don't have any friends.
Right. You can see that they respect each other, and, and it says something because he's the only one that she trusts to go to him for help because, of course, her best friend, the Don Johnson, chief, he's gone. Mm-hmm. So it says something that he's the one that she goes to.
Yeah.
That this is the guy that she feels that out of all the cops that's in there, this is the guy she feels that she can trust. She doesn't go to Pirate Jenny or, to the Russian guy because frankly, they're idiots. But, but yeah, she goes to him.
Yeah. And then he ends up betraying her, right? Because Lori told him that there's a bug in your cactus. And then at the end, when he's telling Angela about the pills, right? And she says it was my grandfather. Like, Lori hears that whole conversation, and Angela realizes in that moment that Glass has betrayed her. And then so she takes the pills and she swallows all of them.
Dumps the whole bottle down her throat.
Right. Which is the perfect way to transition into the last episode we're going to be talking about. And one of the best episodes, if not the best episode of this entire series. And that's episode 6, This Extraordinary Being.
Okay, first of all, let me say, as I said, in our last episode, is that oftentimes, if you read comics long enough, you see that they will put on special issue. Mm-hmm. This is the issue that changes everything. This is nothing will be the same after this. You see that all the time. If this episode of Watchmen was a comic book, that would be on the cover.
Yeah.
However, unlike most comic books where it's bullshit, it's actually true in this one. In this one, not only does it change this series, it changes the original Watchmen comic book too. You can't. It's impossible to go back and reread the original comic book and not think of this episode.
Yeah, and because, like we said before, Alan Moore had never had any intention of Hooded Justice being a black guy. But
right.
It works so well in this. And, excuse me. It worked so well in this. Thank you. And because there's this whole idea of him having to wear a mask in order to be accepted by society. And that works in two different levels. One, as a black man, but two, it also works because we find out that he's bisexual in this, because he's having an affair with Captain Metropolis.
With Captain Metropolis, yeah. Who I believe in the original, it was hinted that he was gay.
Right. It was hinted, and it was also hinted that Hollis Mason in his book, he mentions that, you know, this German strongman who was found dead was probably who he suspects as being Hooded Justice. And in one of the early panels, when Laurie and Dan are at a restaurant, you see this old couple. They're two old men. One of them is drawn to look like Captain Metropolis. The other one looks a lot like that German wrestler guy. So the implication left there is that he didn't actually die. He survived, and him and Captain Metropolis ended up getting married.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because because the whole thing with Hooded Justice being gay came about because supposedly they had speculated that him and Silk Spectre was in a relationship because she was always hanging on to him. Mm-hmm. And it should be noted that it's very interesting in the flashback scenes that we have with the Minutemen, because we do see Captain Metropolis. He recruits Hooded Justice to join his team, but when we have those flashbacks, because this story is about Hooded Justice. Yeah. And, you know, we see him clearly and we see Captain Metropolis clearly, but we don't see the rest of the Minutemen clear. They're kind of blurry. They're in the background, and we can't really see. We see the newspapermen clearly because there's a whole press conference. Mm-hmm. We see everybody else. We don't see, you know, like the comedian and Silhouette and Silk Spectre. They're in the background, but they're very like foggy and blurry, and we can't quite make them out, which I think is quite appropriate because, you know, Watchmen was their story. This is not their story anymore. Right.
So, Will. The cinematography in this episode is amazing. The way they cut back and forth, the way they transition, it's masterfully done. And it's so much, its dream logic is taking full effect here. And I think this is one of the best depictions of a dream that I've ever seen. Because like there's that scene where the racist white cops, right? They're driving alongside Will, and you know they're inviting him out for a beer, and then Will refuses, and they say, "Okay, well next time." And they keep on driving, and they're dragging a black man behind it, and it's just like that didn't actually happen in real life, but it's just that dream imagery is all over the place in this episode, and it's done amazingly well.
It's dream logic.
And they really do a great job of making it feel like, because most times when they depict a dream, it still feels too much like reality in movies and TV shows. But this makes it feel like a dream.
And the whole dreamlike feeling is reinforced because sometimes we see Will, and then sometimes we see Angela as Will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, without any warning, like, you know, like the kid, like we'll hear his voice and then the camera will swing to and it's Angela.
Yeah.
Or we'll hear Angela and we'll turn to him and it's Will, you know, so that carries on the whole thing about, and it kind of leaves you off balance as a viewer because I found myself, how can I put that? Okay, I'm watching it for the second time. And as I'm watching it, I was aware of the fact that I was leaning in closer because I didn't want to miss anything this time around.
Yeah.
You know, it was really drawing me in. I really got sucked more into the story this time. Maybe because I knew what was coming and I wanted to pay more attention to things I had missed the first time around. Mm-hmm. Because this really is an emotionally powerful episode and carries on with the theme of people being traumatized because Will just has one trauma in his life after another. So it's it's no surprise that the poor guy just finally snaps, really. There's no other way to put it. Because he survived the Tulsa massacre. he becomes a police officer with this dream that he's going to fight for justice like his hero, Bass Reeves, whose name he has taken because he's idolized him. He's going to wear a badge. He's going to fight for justice, only to find out that his badge and his status as a police officer means absolutely shit.
Right. And that is made very clear when he arrests Fred, a white shopkeeper who sets fire to a Jewish deli. Now, do you know who Fred is supposed to be in real life?
Have no idea.
Okay, let me see if. So you remember they've got his deli, his meat truck, and the name of his business is FT and Sons.
Okay.
Fred Trump.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because Fred Trump got his start in the meat business, and he was also arrested at a KKK rally.
Okay, that I knew. Yeah, that I knew. I knew his father was I knew Trump's dad was a Klansman.
Yeah, and you look at photos of Fred Trump. He's got like
his grandfather.
Sorry, go ahead.
You know where their money came from, right? You know where their money came from. Trump's grandfather ran a whorehouse.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, his grandfather ran a that was the beginning of the Trump fortune. His grandfather running a whorehouse.
Yeah. Which fits. Totally fits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, doesn't surprise me.
So they find out that, and Will gets, and when the other cops come in, and this racist white cop, and he says, "Oh, it's okay, we'll take care of this," and he gives this hand symbol where he puts like the OK symbol, and he puts it up against his forehead, and that's a signal for a secret society, a secret white nationalist society called Cyclops. And
as we see, part of the reason why Will becomes Hooded Justice is because we see that he has a whole file later on of incidents that he has gotten from newspapers and various other sources because obviously Cyclops has infiltrated the police department to such a degree that the sergeant even tells Will, because Will said, "Well, what does that mean?" And the guy said, "That means you're going to get a hole in your head if you don't mind your business."
Yeah. And
because they've infiltrated the police department.
And they take Will and they beat the crap out of him, and they put a hood over his head and they string him up and they try to lynch him. Then they cut him down. And they tell him, like, if he doesn't back off, next time it's going to happen for real. And this is when Will, so he's walking down the street, he's walking through the alley, he sees this couple getting assaulted. And he still has the noose around his neck, and he puts the hood back on, and he beats the crap out of these criminals and saves the people. And when he goes home, his wife urges him to, take on, to keep doing this. But... Once again, going back to what we were saying earlier about how women drive this series, because it's his wife that encourages him to put on a costume and go out and fight crime. Yeah. And also, there's an interesting contrast between Will and Angela, right? In that Will wipes his eyes with white face paint. Angela wipes her eyes with black face paint.
Yeah.
That was a contrast that jumped out to me this second watch.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I mean they make the contrast really clear, because they have a shot of him where and you say, okay, I see what they did there.
Yeah.
Where he's covering up because of course, since he has to pretend to be a white man, he has to paint that part of his face so that, people will only see, the whites, and they'll just assume, okay, well, this is a white guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, and it also kind of ties back to what Lori was saying in the last episode, or 2 episodes before, where she was talking about heroes using the masks to cover up their own trauma.
Yeah. And like I said, this guy has been traumatized so much that becoming hooded justice, as I see, isn't so much an act of him wanting to be a hero as an act of desperation. It's that he can see no other way, to get what he wants and to feel like a man. Excuse me, but to do this. Whereas we are presented with Captain Metropolis, who is quite plainly is a narcissist. And he's doing this because he thinks, oh, it would be fun to be a costume adventurer, as he puts it when he comes visiting Will, to recruit him. And Will just looks at him like he's like the dumbest piece of dog shit and said, costume adventurer, what are you talking about?
Right.
The contrast between the two men is presented very well, I think, because this is a holy mission for Will. This isn't a joke to him. He realizes that this is something that will affect not only him. He could not only die doing this, but his wife and his child could die. Whereas Captain Metropolis, what's his name? Nelson something or
Nelson
other.
Gardner.
Yeah, Nelson Gardner. This is a lark for him.
Yeah.
He's okay. He is your typical rich spoiled guy that Bruce Wayne pretends to be. You know how Bruce Wayne pretends to be this spoiled, playboy, so nobody will suspect that he's actually Batman. Well,
right.
That's what this guy is.
Absolutely,
He's a rich spoiled asshole.
Yeah, yeah, and you know what? I kind of got the sense. I'm not sure if you picked up on this too, but when they're at the press conference with the other Minutemen, and Will tries to talk about investigating Cyclops. And then Nelson cuts him off and says, "No, we're going to investigate this, this supervillain named Moloch." Did you kind of get the sense that the whole thing was like a PR stunt? That the supervillains like Moloch and all that, they were all like part of a PR stunt?
Yeah, well, you know what? Now that you done said it, yeah, it could have been that, the guy could have paid them off, just say, because Moloch, as we found out, actually from, the original movie, actually wasn't, like this supervillain that he was presenting. Matter of fact, most of the supervillains that these guys fought, they weren't like what we would. Okay, let me put it. They were no Red Skull.
Right.
They weren't the Red Skull. Matter of fact, there's one guy that they mentioned in the original movie. They said that his whole thing was that he just liked to be beat up.
Yeah, Captain Carnage.
Right. So he would do shit just so, he would get, they would beat up on him. It was pretty pathetic once you think about it. So, yeah, because when he's talking about Moloch, and then after that, that's when he pulls aside the drapery he's got over this billboard that's advertising like some bank or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. A PR stunt. Yeah, you know what? It's an interesting interpretation. And again, there is nothing that we haven't seen in the comic book that violates what we're being presented with now, which is what I think is one of the most brilliant things about this episode. Because, okay, let's say you watch it and you don't want to agree with that. You say, well, you know what? I think that's full of shit. I'm just going to believe that he was this German guy. You can do that.
Yeah.
You can do that. But if you want to go with this interpretation of it, you can go with it because there is nothing that's presented. Okay, why couldn't Hooded Justice have been a black man? Because they said in the comic book, nobody ever found out who this guy really was.
Right.
They just speculated he was this German bodybuilder.
Exactly.
But nobody actually knew who he was. So, yeah, it's open to it's open to whatever interpretation you want. You know what I call it? I call it Spider-Man thing. Spider-Man is such a beloved New York hero because he's got that full costume with the full mask.
Oh, right,
so he could be anybody under there.
Yeah.
So if you're an Asian kid, you could think that Spider-Man is Asian. If you're a Mexican kid, you could think Spider-Man is, and you wouldn't be wrong because you don't know what he looks like.
Right.
So it's the same thing with Hooded Justice. You can imagine, yeah, he could have been anybody under there because we never found out who he actually was. He just came, he beat up some people, he operated as a superhero for a while, and then he just disappeared.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we know that, and Lori suspects in the comic that he may have been her biological father, but of course, we find out by the end of the comic that it was Eddie Blake who was.
Right. Yeah. Because as I said earlier, they did have speculation. They was wondering was something going on between Hood and Justice. And in the original comic book, that the Minutemen, they get together. The original Silk Spectre, she's hanging on Hoodie Justice's arm.
Well, in the supplemental material for the PDP stuff, they mentioned that there was kind of it was kind of an act for Silk Spectre to pretend that her and Hooded Justice were dating.
Oh, okay.
So that's also why I kind of think that maybe there was this really heavily PR aspect to it, where they were kind of like almost like a pre-TV reality show. So there are probably like gossip columns and stuff about who Silk Spectre is dating and all that kind of crap. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Because the whole thing with because there's this. Sorry, I just want to get this thing first. Is that there's this part where when they're at that press conference, and what Will's talking about and what Will has seen, it's so disconnected from what Captain Metropolis says about Moloch that it almost feels like it's too incongruous, right? The two parts just don't really fit together, these two different worlds. So that's why I think there was this PR aspect, and that it was all kind of like a farce that Will wasn't really in on.
Well, yeah. Well, as we see in both the original comic book and in the movie, that every one of these characters, they got into it for their own reason. The original Silk Spectre, she just wanted to be famous.
Right.
She wanted her picture taken, and, she wanted to get movie deals and, all kinds of licensing deals, and she wanted to get rich. And there was one character called Dollar Bill who actually was a superhero sponsored by a bank.
Right.
They wanted their own personal superhero. And basically, he just went around to bank openings and, he encouraged people to buy war bonds or whatever, or to open up, I don't know, IRAs or, buy life insurance. And he gets killed because he gets his case caught in the revolving door during a bank robbery. The poor dope.
No case.
Yeah, no case. So, but then we had you have characters like the original Night Owl, who was driven by an honest sense of justice, and who actually wanted to fight crime and do some good. Mm-hmm. But we had all of these other characters that got into the costume thing. Some of them who just thought it would be fun. No doubt the comedian got into it because, well, he was a psychopath, and this was a way for him to beat up people and get out his violent tendencies. As long as he was beating up the right people, nobody said anything.
Right.
So everybody got into this thing for diverse reasons. So your interpretation of the whole Minutemen thing is just as valid as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, it's just as valid. Which, again, going back to, that's one of the brilliant things about this whole episode and the whole concept of Hooded Justice being a black man, because there is nothing in it that violates what we already know. It's just another interpretation.
Absolutely, yeah. And that was one of the things that I really liked about this episode, is how well it works this new interpretation in with everything that we've seen of Hooded Justice in the comics before this. And so then also Will finds out that this episode passes over several years, and then there's a riot at a movie theater, and Will finds out that Cyclops is using some sort of like hypnotic control on black people, using special film projectors and telling them to turn on each other, basically, and to kill each other.
Because he talks to a woman in the movie theater, which again we see how Will is disrespected by his fellow officers, because one of them says, "Well, it's about time you showed up. We need somebody that speaks their language."
Yeah.
And he goes into the movie theater, and one of the traumatized women one of the few people that are still alive, she tells him, well, when the movie started, she said, the light started flickering, like a strobe light, sort of effect. And she said, and I just heard voices telling me to hurt and kill people.
Yeah.
So Cyclops is, this is Cyclops' ultimate master plan, that they're going to use this special kind of strobe effect to incite riots in black neighborhoods and have them kill each other. Mm-hmm. So he wants, so Will, of course, goes to Captain Metropolis, and he says, listen, this is what's happening. I need your help. I need, the men to come. Captain Metropolis isn't interested in nothing but, balling, quite frankly. He just, he dismisses him in such a way. It made me pissed off.
Yeah.
As a black man, it pissed me off the way that he just dismissed him.
Well, this also, because Will's explaining that they're using mind control, and Nelson reacts as if it's the craziest thing he's ever heard in the world, which is why I think the whole thing with Moloch and the Minute was why I get this PR stunt feeling, because wait a minute, you guys fight evil magicians, but you think hypnotism is out of the realm of possibility?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah, so those little types of cues, they kind of really jumped out at me.
And let me tell you something. That scene where he asked him, there isn't a black person that's listening to this that doesn't understand that hasn't had a white person that they've gone to and asked them for a favor or assistance with something and been dismissed like that. Mm-hmm. Trust me, it's happened to me. So I knew exactly how that guy felt, because I'm telling you, it happened. So that was another powerful moment in a lot of powerful moments.
Now,
because that's the one moment where you say, okay, well, see, now I know. If I didn't know I couldn't trust white people before, now I really know I can't trust them, because serious. Because he's saying, okay, I trusted this guy. I gave this guy my body. Basically.
Did you like speaking of that, did you like the episode title I chose for the last one?
What? No.
For the first 3 episodes we did, White People Ruin Everything.
Oh man, I think I cracked up I sat here for about like 10 minutes, and I laughed up. I said, oh man, that cat, he doing, yeah, white. I said, you know what? If there was ever a title that would probably sum up the totality of, this whole series, that would be it. White people ruin, because they do. White people basically ruin everything in this movie.
Now,
man,
I get what you're saying about the about Will feeling dismissed, and I felt a connection to that scene as well, because I'm not going to say it's the same experience, but being a white guy in Japan, I'm part of a minority now. So I'm noticing a lot of things. And I've been in those situations where, like, at work, I'd suggest, why don't we do this? And, my opinion was pretty much just dismissed out of hand. So I really understand that, like, that spoke to me coming from that perspective as well.
And if I could tie this into a real world thing that we're all going through now, you read a lot about, there's a lot of people, white people, that are asking the government for help. They're asking their elected officials for help. They're begging for help. They're looking for leadership. They're looking for guys, everything like that, and they're not getting it. Mm-hmm. And you know what? Quite frankly, a lot of white people are feeling what black people have been feeling for hundreds of years now.
That's a good point. Yeah.
It's the same shit we've been going through. It's just that now, okay, I want to say to white people, and don't take this the wrong way, people, but yeah, you're feeling now what we've been going through, and and you know what? I think that there's going to be a paradigm shift when we come out on the other side. There's going to be a new consciousness.
I think there has to be. I mean,
there has to be. If we got to go for, you know what? We can't go back to the same thing that we were doing. We would go, because if this coronavirus thing has not shown us anything else, it's just how awfully broken this system we live in really is.
Yeah.
We've been living in a dream, and we have got to wake up, because if we don't wake up, we literally have got people dying in the streets.
Absolutely.
That's how bad it's getting. I honestly do not see how we can just go back to the way things were, once we get past this. And yeah, we're going to get past. We get past everything. We're going to get past this. But we have to learn from this. And for God's sake, we have to be better people.
Mm-hmm.
For sweet Jesus' sake, folks, we got to be better people.
Yeah. And
bottom line.
And it's crazy. They're hiring prisoners, paying them like $6 an hour or whatever to dig mass graves.
Yeah.
I mean, this shit is insane. Like, I heard that on the news. I'm like, wait. Did they just say mass graves? Did I just hear that right?
I mean, what are we going to wait for? Are we going to wait until we're bulldozing dead bodies in the mass graves?
And there's still, the crazy thing, though, is there are still people who refuse to believe that it's happening.
Oh yeah. You have, trust me, they're on the news all the time. There are people who still believe that this is a hoax. Oh yeah, well this is not. Well, you know what? A lot of people, that's the only way that they can protect themselves. Mm-hmm. From what's going on, because we've lived with the illusion for so long that this is America and nothing can touch us. Now 9/11 taught us that wasn't the case. I guess maybe we needed another wake up call, because we had slid back into that complacency.
Well, we had several wake up calls. Like this is why I'm like, I get this is why I'm saying it's, I don't know. I believe that there should be a paradigm shift after this, but after 9/11 and seeing how things didn't really change. Some ways they got worse. And then after the financial crisis, they bail out the rich people and they leave. They tell the poor people to go fuck themselves. So America is so resistant. It's like that old Winston Churchill quote. Like, I don't know if, apparently there's some debate over whether or not Churchill actually said this, but it's been popularly attributed to him. And it's that you can always count on America to do the right thing after they've exhausted every other possible option.
And it's true, whether he said it or not. Yeah, it basically is true. I mean, they tell, the regular people, such as us, the hoi polloi, the Joe and Jane Punch Clock, they tell us, you need to have at least 6 months, rent and whatever in the bank as a backup in case of an emergency. Okay, well, why don't the airline companies have a backup when there's an emergency? Why is it that the first week that the coronavirus hit, the airlines was the first one in line with their hand out saying, we need a bailout?
And you know what? Did you hear what the Boeing CEO said? Because there were talks about attaching strings to the bailout money, saying like, okay, well, if you do this, then you also have to do this, or even talk about like possibly nationalizing parts of the industry. And the Boeing CEO said, well, if that's the case, then we don't want the money. We have other options. Well, if you've got other options, why aren't you using those other damn options?
Yeah, why aren't you using those options? Why are you here back again with your hat in your hand saying, you need a bailout? And then they had the woman that was the president of the union for the flight attendants. And she was on the news programs and she was saying, listen, if you're going to give the money, make sure you give the money to the people that actually do it. She said, don't give it to the executives. She said, because they're not going to do the right thing with it.
Right.
She said, they didn't do the right thing with it when you gave it to them the last time.
Yeah.
She said, why are you going to give them more money? And they're not. And she said, they're not going to do the right thing with it.
Yeah.
She said, they're going to pay themselves first. They're not going to give it to us.
Yeah. I said what they should do is, nationalize the airlines, completely nationalize them, put the workers on the boards, and then fire all the damn CEOs and do not give them any severance package or golden parachute or any of that shit.
No, it's ridiculous.
I mean, that's what they should do, because, this whole idea in corporate America of failing upward to success is gotten ridiculous.
And you know what? This is where I'm going to, okay. I'm going to say something, and this is probably going to be the last episode of Superhero Cinephile after I say it. You know what? We here, the citizens of the United States, have nobody to blame for the state that we're in except ourselves. Because you know something? We should have been rioting in the streets.
Oh, yeah.
Long ago. Going to Washington and throwing that and say, you know what? This bullshit has got to stop. We should, I'm saying we should have been rioting in the streets. What were they doing over there in what was it, China? They was rioting for like 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in Hong Kong.
Hong Kong. They were rioting. That's what we should have been doing here. But you know what? We got our HBO, we have our Netflix, we have our Hulu, we have our phones, we have our Facebook, so we're happy.
The most disgusting thing for me was when so in 2008, after the financial crisis, I think it was like probably 2010 is when it started. You had the Occupy Wall Street movement, right? People rebelling against the fact that the 1% had gotten this massive, unprecedented bailout while everyone else got nothing. And the guy who sends cops into Central Park and all these other places to beat up these people who are protesting income inequality, then becomes the guy that the Democrats are thinking about making president.
You have to laugh. You do. I laugh. You know what? If I didn't laugh, I'd be running through the streets with a machine gun. Serious. I'd be throwing Molotov cocktail. You know what? I would put on a mask.
Actually, Dominic Purcell made a low-budget movie about that called Assault on Wall Street.
Really?
Yeah, with him gunning down Wall Street types. I never saw it, but all I saw was it's like one of those low-budget action movie type things.
I was watching a low-budget movie last night, with my wife called Brown Paper Bag, which is about a black private eye in Hollywood during the 1940s. And they have one character that's, and he's talking to this black private eye. And he said something that was very telling. He said, there are 3 seats of power in this country. He said there's Wall Street, which controls the money. He said there's the White House that controls the military, and then there's Hollywood that controls the images.
Good point.
And I said, holy shit. I never thought, I said, wow. And, I had to really stop and digest that because I had never heard it put like that before. But when I thought about it, I said, yeah, something? He's 100% right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what was the name of that movie again? Brown Paper Bag?
Brown Paper Bag. It's on Amazon Prime.
Okay, I'll see if I can find that.
Overlook the low budget, and I think I read a review. It's up on the Ferguson Theater. If you or the rest of you guys listening, you want to read the review before you check it out. Yeah, but it was that one line that guy said, and like I said, wow. I said, you know what? That's some deep shit.
Mm-hmm.
I had never thought of it that way before, but he said Wall Street controls the money. He said those are the real 3 seats of power in this country: Wall Street, the White House, and Hollywood.
And so, taking it back to this movie, I also wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the guy who plays young Will, Jovan Adepo, and I've only seen him in one other thing. He was in When They See Us, Ava DuVernay's series about the Central Park Five.
Oh, okay.
And apparently he was also in Jack Ryan too, the TV show. And he was also in the Leftovers, which is also another Damon Lindelof series. But this is the first thing that I really noticed him in. And man, he's great in this role. He did a wonderful job of showing that the way he's walking back and forth between these different lives. And this is something else that kind of stuck out to me is there's this idea of code switching, right? When people, in some ways, they become a different person when they're around different types of people. So Will's one person when he's at the police station. He's another person when he's at home with his wife. He's another person when he's with the Minutemen. And he's yet even another person when he's alone with Nelson.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something that as a black person, you learn how to do, almost as a survival method.
Right.
When you go around white people, you act and you talk in a different way than you do. I mean, I would go to work during the day, and I would act one different way. But then when I got, back to where I lived and I got around my buddies and everything like that, I spoke and acted a completely different way.
Right.
And even the way that I'm talking on here now, I don't talk this way when I don't. I'm a lot more profane as my wife. I don't talk this way. No, but it's you learn how to be. This is why I think that the notion of a black man being a superhero isn't so far-fetched, because in a way you have to take on different personas depending on whatever situation you're in, and usually you got to do it in the blink of an eye. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you got to switch up your persona.
Did you ever see the movie The Hate U Give?
No.
Okay, so I had to watch it recently because so I teach a class where I'm teaching English through movies, and me and the staff of the school, like, we go back and forth with like movie suggestions, and so they suggested, why don't you try teaching this movie, The Hate U? So I did, and the main actress in it, whose name is escaping me right now, but she's a black girl from the low income neighborhood, but her parents have decided to send her to like this prep school where it costs more money to get there and everything, and she does the code switching thing very just like you were talking about. Like, when she's around the people at the school, she talks one way, her voiceover narration says that the star at school is not going to say anything that will make anybody think for a second that she could be ghetto. But then when she goes home and goes back to her neighborhood, like, the way she speaks completely changes. And I was reminded of that with what you just said.
Yeah. Well, you have to do that because when I was, teenager, when I was growing up, I grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, which wasn't, wasn't the nicest of neighborhoods during the 70s when I grew up. And there was a certain way that I couldn't talk, because if I did, then of course I get the dreaded thing, oh, what are you trying to be, white?
Right.
You couldn't talk. Yeah, there was a certain way. It was a certain way I couldn't talk, But then when I got around white people, of course, then I talked another way, and then I would get the thing where they would look at me as if I were an alien, and they'd say, "Oh, you're so articulate."
Right.
So yeah. So
well, I'm reminded of a story you told me when someone had emailed you and was mad at you for making him think you were white because you didn't write like how he quote unquote thought a black person should write.
Oh yeah. Yeah, when my first novel, Dylan and the Voice of Odin, the first edition had my picture on the back, which was my wife's idea. I really didn't care one way or another. But she said, no, your author, your picture should be on the back of the book. So I put it on the back of the book. And it was a guy who had read my fan fiction for years. And he had emailed me, oh, I love your writing. Oh, man, you do this. No, you're great and everything like that. So when the book came out, he emailed me and he said he did not appreciate me tricking him all these years. And that if I really wanted to be a success as a writer, I should stick to issues and subjects that would be of interest to black people and stop trying to write like a white man.
And see, like, when I remember when that book came out too, and we had been we'd known each other for several years by that point. But yeah, it wasn't until I saw your picture on the back that I realized, I'm like, oh, he's a black guy, cool, and then that was it.
Yeah, but you know what? I had never made a secret out of the fact that I was black before. It wasn't like, I had represented myself as being white,
Right.
So I didn't see where that was coming from, but I just did what I usually do. Say, oh, well, it's white folks, and I went on. But yeah, sometimes, really seriously, sometimes when I respond to certain things on Facebook, and you've probably seen it, where it's the scene from Chinatown where Jack Nicholson's being led away by his friend, and he says, "Let it go, Jake, it's Chinatown."
Yeah.
Well, underneath, when I post the little picture, Instead, it has the caption, "Forget it, Jake. It's white folks." And yeah, I mean, sometimes that's all you got to do. Well, you know what? It's white folks, and you move on.
My favorite one of those is the one from Unbreakable Kimmy Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, not shit. It's a good series actually. What white nonsense is this?
Yeah.
Or another one. Even white people are sick of white people's nonsense.
You have I have so many white friends that say that. They say, you know what, I'm just about sick of white people. I said, what? I said, yeah, I'm about sick of white people, really.
Well, being in Japan for so long, when I go back to America or when I see stuff going on in America, like I get even more sick of white people nonsense now. Because I've been so disconnected that I don't even sympathize with it anymore.
And yes, I know some people out there say, well, what about black nonsense? Well, yeah, there is black nonsense, but it's different from white nonsense.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Trust me. It is.
And this is a white guy saying that it's different from black nonsense.
And trust me, there's black nonsense. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. But trust me, it's nothing like white nonsense.
Yeah. Maybe that should be the episode title here. There's nothing like white nonsense.
That's nothing like white nonsense. Yeah, okay, we got the title. It's nothing like white nonsense.
Every white listener of this show is just going to go find another podcast now.
Yeah. I told you, man, this is going to be the last one. We might as well get ready for it. Yeah, this is going to be the last one. Although I don't know. You know what? I got away with saying some of the most outrageous shit when we were doing, the other part, what I was doing better in the dark with Tom DJ. I said some stuff that later on I said, damn, you know what? I shouldn't have said. But you know what? Nobody said anything. Mm-hmm. So I said, I said some stuff I just knew that people were going to say, how dare you? You can't talk that way to me. I thought you're a horrible No, as a matter of fact, I did get one or two emails from people telling me that they thought I was, like a racist. You're just a racist. And I thought, oh, okay. But nothing like what I thought I was going to get. I thought, I said, okay, well, hey, which only encouraged me to keep on saying outrageous shit.
All right. So is there anything else we want to mention about these 3 episodes?
Only that taken as and know something, we never even got to. Wait a minute. What did I want to get? We never got to the end where we see that Angela, because she eventually does come out of it.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, and we see that she ends up, she's been taken to Lady Trieu's, mansion or whatever, because apparently she knows how to bring people out of this, because apparently it's happened before when people have taken too much of this drug, which is called nostalgia, by the way. So apparently she knows how to bring people out of this. So that's how the end of the episode ends, with her. And we say, okay, now what's going to happen next? Because
that's something I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something I wanted to mention too, was about nostalgia. So if you remember in the comic book, nostalgia was the name of this cologne that Vike produced. And there's this memorable scene where it's like a series of panels. I think it's when I can't remember exactly when it is, but the panels are intercut with the bottle of nostalgia falling and shattering on the ground, right? And that was kind of like an indictment of the comic book industry at the time, which still fits today, too. And they take it a step further, because Lady Trieu has turned it into a drug that allows people to relive their memories. And the whole point of it was that this was to help people who were suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's or things like that. It was supposed to help them recover their memories. But as we find out and we can talk more about this in the next episode, but what we find out is that people were abusing the drugs and people were wanting to go back and live in the past, basically.
Right. Yeah. And also again, we see that nostalgia is another clue as to Lady Trieu, her heritage, Because like you said, the nostalgia was a brand of perfume that was one of the companies owned by her father.
Right.
Nostalgia. So if you're paying attention, then you say, okay, I get that. And matter of fact, we do see the nostalgia bottle. I remember now in the previous episode with Wade, because one of the focus groups is about this perfume called Mercy.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But it's the exact same nostalgia bottle that the nostalgia perfume came in.
Mm-hmm. And
that I picked up on.
And we can talk more about this because they go into more explanation. Nostalgia plays a big part in the next episode, or the next set of one of the next episodes anyway. But it's this idea of wanting to live in the past, wanting to avoid the present to go back and live in the past, which applies not only to comic book fans but just America in general.
True, very true.
Like there's this constant,
Yeah, because what was Trump's whole slogan? Make America great again.
Right.
Which was a rallying cry to go back to the past, but a certain past, not necessarily past is, that's going to be beneficial for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But,
exactly.
Yeah.
And not even a past that really existed ever.
No. I mean, the past that he was calling for really never existed.
Yeah.
It never did. It was just a dream. It was an ideal that, but as long as he could evoke that dream, that ideal, damn.
But you see the same thing in on the Democratic side. You see the same thing too, right? Because Joe Biden's whole campaign platform is basically, let's go back to the Obama years.
Yeah, let's go back to Obama. Yeah, basically that's what it is. That's his whole shtick. As much as, I like Joe, don't get me wrong, I like him, but something, they should have never dragged that old man out there.
No.
I mean, to do this. They should have let him live out the rest of his life in peace.
Yeah.
They should have let him do that, really. They should never have dragged him out there. It's a shame what they done, to him. And actually, I was talking to my wife the other day because Joe Biden resurfaced after about like 2 weeks. Nobody knew where it was. And I said, he probably had the coronavirus. That's how I believe. And you know what? I went to, because you got to remember something. These presidential candidates have been all over the country for, the past year.
Right.
And also, if you notice, a lot of them, look at Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren never saw a TV camera that she didn't love. She was on TV every day. Oh,
and she was taking selfies with every single person who wanted one. Like people were waiting 3 hours in line to take selfies with her.
Well, this is what I'm saying. But you haven't seen hide nor hair of Elizabeth Warren for 2 weeks either. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't surprise me if every last single one of the presidential candidates had the coronavirus.
Yeah. Now, one of the things and full disclosure, I voted for him. I'm a supporter of his. But even all that being said, I think it's really admirable that Bernie Sanders has turned his campaign operation into a fundraising machine for victims of coronavirus.
Yeah.
And he's been, he's been doing these live streams like pretty much every single day, talking with doctors, talking with medical experts, talking about things that we should be doing now, things that we should do going forward to reform the healthcare industry, healthcare in America. And I mean, that's the kind of stuff Joe Biden should be doing.
If we had any sense in this country, which we don't have, but if we had any sense, we do, we just say, you know what, hell with it. Let's just put Jimmy Carter, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Bernie Sanders in charge of everything, because obviously they're the toughest human beings walking the planet.
Yeah.
Now, Ruth Bader Ginsburg gets up in the morning and go looking for cancer. See, I know she don't have the coronavirus, because cancer done told the coronavirus about that chick. They say, leave her alone. Because she wake up in the morning and come looking for me to kick my ass. So cancer done told coronavirus, you stay the hell away from her, far away from her. Jimmy Carter has beat brain cancer, like 2 or 3 times?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Bernie Sanders had a heart attack, and the next week he was back out on the road.
And he was stronger than ever. It's like they feed on the diseases.
Yeah, these are the people that should be running the country, because obviously these are the toughest human beings walking the planet.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I'm half convinced that she eats a bowl of nails every morning.
Oh man, that chick, she scared the shit out of me. If I met her real life, she said, "Nah, listen, I ain't messing with you."
They don't call her Notorious RBG for nothing. I'm
telling you, cancer the toe, coronavirus. Listen, do yourself a favor. Don't mess with her. Leave that chick alone, man. I'm telling you. So I know she don't got. So I know she has a guy. Because remember, they had the thing yesterday. She was in the gym working out, and they was criticizing her. I said, listen, there's one person I know ain't got the coronavirus. Is RBG.
Well, Jimmy Carter's 95 years old, man, and he's still going out there building houses. I mean, Jesus.
He's building houses. Who does that? Please, man, give me a break.
I'm only 36 and I'm not building any fucking houses.
Man, listen. I'm telling you, yeah.
All right.
I ain't building no houses. That man, it's like I said, obviously, let them run shit. Because obviously, they're the toughest people we got on the planet today. So let them run shit.
Well, there was Stephen Colbert did this thing where he tried to join Ruth Bader Ginsburg for one of her workout routines. He couldn't keep up.
I believe it.
Yeah. But yeah, just put those three in charge of everything and just let them take care of it.
In charge of everything. Yeah.
All right. So I think that's about all we have to say about these episodes then. Or is there anything else?
Not right now. Probably something will come across to me. And you know something? We'll probably have to do the next 3 episodes, and then we'll probably have to do another special episode after that to get in everything that we forgot to talk about. Serious, because there is so much in this that, like I said last time, we could probably easily go. We've been talking now for 2 hours, 15 minutes. We could easily go for another 2 hours talking about just these 3 episodes.
Definitely, yeah. There's just so much stuff in these episodes, and
so much stuff.
Oh man, I'm so glad that I bought this series because I am going to be watching this again and again and again.
No, absolutely. I usually end up watching Watchmen at least once a year, and I haven't gotten it yet, but I want to get the TV series so I can watch the movie and watch this all at one time, because you know what? I figured that I'll probably get the full immersive effect watching everything back to back, and I will be making even more connections between the movie and the comic book and the TV series, which is the brilliant thing about this whole Watchmen thing, and that there are so many connections that that you can make, and you're always seeing new things. And like you said, we could come back next year and do it, and there would be a whole new set of things that we've seen that we didn't see before.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, so that does it for this episode, and next week, again, we're going weekly with these right now during this coronavirus whole thing.
Yay!
As long as I can keep it up, as long as if they keep delaying schools, classes, and everything like that, I can keep it going. So
yeah.
So head on over to our Facebook page, facebook.com/superhero cinephiles. Join in the conversation. You can follow us on Facebook or on Instagram and Twitter. We're there as Super Cinema Pod. And also we got a Patreon page, patreon.com/Super Cinema Pod. So go there, become a patron, and toss us a few bucks to help us support the show and help us keep the lights on around here.
It wouldn't hurt.
All right, that's all for this week, and we will be back next week to talk about the last 3 episodes of Watchmen.
And until then, please, folks, stay safe, be well, and stay home.
Yeah, and wash your hands.
Constantly.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's it for this week. Thanks again, and we will talk to you next week.
Good night, and God bless.
Thanks for listening to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, or if you have a superhero movie or TV show you'd like us to cover in a future episode, you can email us at superherocinephiles@gmail.com, or you can also visit us on the web at superherocinephiles.com. If you like what you hear, leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Each review helps us reach more potential listeners. You can also support the show by renting or purchasing the movies discussed, or by picking up our books, all of which can be accessed through the website, as well as find links to our social media presences. The theme music for this show is a shortened version of Superhero Showdown, a royalty-free piece of music courtesy of BesleonStudios.com.